Welcome home. I'm Dr.Thema, a minister, licensed psychologist, and sacred artist, and this is Homecoming, a podcast to facilitate your journey home to yourself. While I will provide weekly inspiration and mental health tips, this podcast is not a substitute for therapy. I'm so excited you're on the journey. If you want to request specific topics or share your progress, email me at homecomingpodcast@gmail.com. Also, after you listen, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Homecoming. And on today, our focus is recognizing detours. Recognizing detours. So we are on the journey home to ourselves, and I'm grateful that you have chosen to be a co-journer with us. And I am also mindful, both as a mental health professional and as an individual that has had to go on her own healing journey, that we can get distracted along the way, that we can be doing some beautiful work for ourselves, making progress, getting more connected, and then you can find yourself either stuck or moving backward. And so I want to highlight for you what some of the detours are on the journey home so that when they show up in your path, you can recognize them and do a divine walk around, that there are some pits that are recognizable. And so we want to not keep landing in the same pit. So one of the detours on the journey home is numbing our pain instead of healing our pain. Numbing our pain instead of healing our pain. That's when we say, I know that I'm disconnected from me, that I want to heal, that I want to feel better, but that stuff is too painful. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to talk about it. I basically want to skip forward and feel better. And so then whenever the painful memories show up, whenever we are triggered or have reminders, we just go into distraction. And so we can use all kinds of things, and some of us use people in order to numb out. And so you want to be really careful about when I am despairing, when I am frustrated, what is it that may not be healthy for me, but that has become my go-to? What is it that I have been using to disconnect from the pain, which feels like relief in the moment, but all of the stuff is still there? And so I want you to know on today, numbing out is not the same thing as healing. And so what is your fix? Is it food? Is it busyness? Is it a new relationship, or not a relationship, but a new hookup partner? You know, what is it that you are using to disconnect from the pain? And in what ways does it work, right? Because you wouldn't do it if it didn't bring some relief. But in what ways is it also incomplete and ineffective? And so I actually have to face some things and not just freeze my heart. Not only do we recognize that a detour is choosing to numb the pain instead of addressing the pain, another detour that many of us get caught up in is unhealthy relationships. Do you understand that connecting in an unhealthy way with someone can take you on an alternate route? That you can land in some places either through unhealthy friendships or unhealthy romantic relationships that take you further away from yourself. And so when I am spending most of my time with people for whom I have to perform or I have to be my old self, then that is a detour. And so you want to ask yourself, when you're in the presence of another, does this feel like home? Am I being true to myself? Am I honoring myself? Am I recognizing my value and my worth? Do I have to hold my tongue or hold my breath? Do I have to or not have to? Am I choosing to be what other people want instead of who I am? And in that way, I am abandoning myself again. When we have shared vows in the past, a number of you shared that I will not leave myself behind. So we then recognize um, that we have to take inventory about the kinds of people we enjoy relating with or who we see ourselves connecting to, because sometimes it is a very large distraction that sometimes we will connect to people who keep a lot of drama going because it is a distraction from ourselves. Sometimes we connect with people with whom we need to be the rescuer. And so we have this messiah complex and superhero syndrome because clearly, if I'm saving you, I must be okay. And the reality is that even in our brokenness, we can try to be a bridge for other people. And then we both end up in a really despairing place. And so, what do your current relationships tell you about yourself and your journey home? Who do you talk to the most each week? And whoever that is that you spend the most of the time talking to, is that relationship, is that friendship getting you closer to home or farther away from home? And we even need to recognize what we are giving up in order to gain, right? So sometimes in relationships, we are gaining attention, we are gaining affection, we are gaining entertainment. And I want to ask you, what is the cost you are paying for that? Are you having to erase yourself? Are you having to mute your inner voice? Is your spirit speaking and you're ignoring it because of a piece of what you are getting? And so my relationships can either heighten and foster my journey home, facilitate my journey home, or my relationships can actually cause me to become even more disconnected. So as you are meeting new people, interacting with new people, you want to do a spirit check, a spirit check within yourself to say, is this a detour? Is this a detour? What is the pull? What is the thing that is pulling me into this person? And what parts of me am I perhaps leaving behind in order to be pulled in? And if you are in healthy relationships and healthy friendships, then you can say, oh, not only is this is not a detour, but actually it's a divine connection, right? That piece of iron sharpens iron. That when I'm in the presence of good folks, right, then I have more awareness, more insight. I am leaning into truth. I am leaning into compassion. I am understanding myself in a richer and a deeper way. And so it can go both ways. It can accelerate my journey home, or it can distract me from my journey home. And only we can answer that for ourselves. Now, I know some of you will ask the question, well, what happens if I'm already with them? Right? If, because many of us, if you're with people for years, you grow over time. And so then it's about, are we growing at the same time and growing in the same direction or not? Right? And so in friendship, Sometimes we are committed to friendships because of longevity, even though we don't really have anything in common. Our thinking, our values, what we enjoy is totally shifted. And so then I have to say, what does this mean in terms of how I spend my time? That I don't have to be mean spirited. I don't have to say cruel things. I don't have to be condescending, but I also do need to make choices that align with who I am. I have to make choices about my time and my energy that resonate with truth. And so we have to each assess that for ourselves, whether in new relationships or in old relationships, and looking at how to walk together so that there can be mutual growth and that we can mutually edify and build each other up. So we want to recognize detours of numbing instead of healing. We want to recognize the detour of unhealthy relationships, whether friendships or romantic. I also want to encourage you to recognize the detour of the familiar, that we often retreat to what we know. We retreat to what we are used to, even when we know it's not good for us, but it feels right, meaning it feels familiar. And when we are stressed, that's what we go to. When we're feeling insecure, we reach for the old things that used to affirm us or used to comfort us. And on today, it really is about, am I willing to risk the discomfort of living in the unfamiliar? Am I willing to risk the discomfort of being new, of being different? Am I willing to risk the discomfort of I don't know what I'm doing, right? To be new, newly home to myself, is to be in new territory. For some of you, loving and kindness are new. For some of us, fussing and complaining are familiar. Picking out what's wrong is familiar. Being the negative voice, or some of you like to be the quote unquote devil's advocate, that's the familiar script. But what would it look like to actually look for the good, to speak of the good, not only in others, but also in yourself? For some of us, the familiar is being guarded, being defensive, being in combat mode. And so the unfamiliar is kindness. The unfamiliar is openness. The unfamiliar is being transparent and honest. And I hope on today that you will at least start catching yourself in the act when we start retreating, right? That's the progress. Because sometimes we're not yet at the point where we can cut it off before we go there. But if you can catch yourself in the moment and say, wait, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is not how I want to be. This is not how I want to live. And so even though I have started down this path of retreating to the familiar, I'm going to shift out of it. I'm going to pivot, right? I'm going to pivot. And that is progress, right? To be able to see it, because before you didn't even have the awareness. For some of us, we really were in such denial. We just thought that's the way it is. Or we thought that's who I am, right? You say, like, I'm not being a false self or a mass self. I'm being me. But really it was us acting out of our past patterns. And so one of the important detours that we want to walk away from is the familiar patterns of dysfunction. And you have to identify what those are for you. What is your What was your tendency that worked against you? I talked about being harsh, but some of us, our tendency was silence, right? Our tendency was to neglect ourselves and look out for everyone else. And so, what was your pattern that doesn't serve you? What is your pattern that is not healthy for you? And so, to catch yourself doing it this week and compassionately make a new choice. Compassionately make a new choice. And then the final detour I want to mention is when we assume our symptoms are our identity, right? So we are on this journey home, and you will stop too soon if you land in your wound and say, I'm home, right? I made it. This is me. Like the truth is that, whatever your painful truths are, that I was raised by alcoholic parents, that is my truth. Or my truth is that I was molested for years. That is my truth. Or my truth is I don't trust anybody. That is my truth. Well, I want you to know all of those are truths, but they are not your identity. And so my identity is more than what has happened to me. It is more than what I have done. It is even more than my distress and my pain, that I am more than my tears. So my tears are a part of me. My anger and frustration and insecurity are a part of me. The trauma and drama are a part of me. But there is a me that is more expansive and has greater depth than any event. There is a me that is more powerful, that is more wise, that is more capable than the lies I've been told about myself. And so on your journey home, while it is important to recognize the wounds, it is important to recognize the pain, I invite you to reject the myth, to reject the lie that your pain is who you are. So you have experienced pain, and some of us have also inflicted pain, but there is a deeper aspect of our identity. And so do not stop at your wound. Recognize and get to know the you that is beyond the wound, that is bigger than the wound. That's the journey home. That's the journey home. And so we will not stop before prematurely. We will not stop prematurely. And here's the grace. On the journey, sometimes we do get caught up. Sometimes you're like, I was working on myself and we're on episode 20 something. And now, like, look, I ended up over in this pit, or I ended up over doing this thing I used to do. Well, here's the grace. We get back on the path. We get back on the journey. In AA, they say one day at a time, right? One day at a time. And so we want to really help ourselves to know, just because I stumble doesn't mean I have to stay down. Just because I veered off the path and I got caught up in some nonsense, I don't have to stay with the nonsense. I give myself grace to say, okay, let me dust myself off and get back on the journey home. So I invite your soul to tell your heart, mind, body, and spirit, welcome home.